Good evening, one and all, and welcome. It's great to have you here with us tonight to talk about greyhounds, because that's something that we all love to talk about, and particularly greyhound owners and those of us that have been mixing with greyhounds for a long time. There's nothing better than talking about greyhounds. And tonight we'd like to talk about the behaviour of greyhounds and getting them into your space. A lot of greyhounds come from, our greyhounds, many of them come from a racing background, and they've come from a background of being in a kennel with their brothers and sisters and parents, and may not have been in a domestic situation. And you'd be surprised by the things and domestic items that we take for granted that greyhounds find a little bit puzzling. Shiny floors, strange noises like telephones going off, and televisions, and crowds of people. So it really is getting them used to our domestic life. We find that they do that fairly quickly and pretty easily, but there is a bit of a transition period. So tonight we're going to introduce Liam Deans Pope. Liam, I hope you're online with us tonight. Are you there, Liam? No, we haven't got him yet. Liam has put together, he's an animal behaviourist who has put together a presentation that we're going to show very, very shortly. Getting off the ground, on the right foot with common problems with greyhounds. They are unique in many, many ways, apart from the fact that they'll steal your furniture. But there are a few things you need to take into consideration with the greyhound. We're going to go over that, and hopefully Liam is going to be back with us in about an hour's time to answer any questions that you might have about getting a greyhound settled in to your domestic home environment and any anxieties that they might show. So hopefully we'll get to talk to Liam very, very shortly. Also with us tonight is Megan Thomas. Hi, Megan.
Hi, Phil.
Now, Megan is our acting adoption manager at Greyhound Adoption Program at GAP. She's also an animal behaviourist. I never know whether it's behaviourist or behaviouralist, but behaviourist is a lot easier to say. So let's go with that. Megan, what's your background with the greyhound breed?
With greyhounds, I guess my start in sighthounds in general is whippets. So much smaller, but it's similar in a lot of aspects of their behaviour, health, and how they settle in. The things that kind of unsettle a whippet are very similar to greyhounds. And also, I was a president of the Whippet Racing Club of Victoria for 6 years, back ending in 2012. So we actually raced at Sandown every month. So I had quite a lot to do with the team at Sandown, and we ran our whippet fun days and things exactly the same as you would run a greyhound race. So we would grade them, they would be timed, and things like that as well. So that was my foray into sighthounds, and then I've been with GAP now for almost 12 months as the animal behaviourist with GAP, and it's been a really good time. I myself have, I think my second day on, fell in love with Greyhound, and she's now part of our family. So it didn't take me long to be taken over to the dark side, to adopt a beautiful long snoot. So yeah, and I am finding that a lot of the things that my greyhound, or behaviourally that my greyhound does, my whippets do. So there are a lot of similarities with other sighthounds as well. So yeah, that's kind of my background in greyhounds.
Are they closely related, the two breeds, the whippet and the greyhound? I mean, we know they look very similar, or on a different scale.
They do look very similar. They all originate from England. They were all coursing animals, so that's their instinct. That's what they were bred for. So they all had that very innate instinctual prey drive that we see in whippets and also greyhounds. So even though I don't think they exist within each other. Like they weren't used to breed with one to create the other. There are a lot of similarities, just that a Whippet sort of maxes out between 10 and 15 kilos, as opposed to the greys, obviously, which are sort of the biggest ones are 35, 40 kilos. So, yeah.
Are they just as lazy as a greyhound?
Yeah, oh yeah, exactly the same. That's what I mean. Like a 20-minute run around and they'll sleep for the rest of the day. So almost identical in every way, just their stature is the only difference.
Fantastic. Thank you, Megan. Now, Megan's going to be around after this presentation from Liam to answer any questions you may have specifically about GAP and the GAP greyhounds. I should also mention a couple of things. My name's Phil Weir. I work in the Greyhound communications department at GRV, and I should have probably introduced myself in the first place. Hannah Holloway I'd like to introduce as well, our built-in palindrome. Hannah is going to be the backstop tonight and is running the ropes and pulleys for us. And we'll also be back with Hannah later. If you do have any questions as we go through, please post them in the chat function and we'll get to them after this presentation. Another thing I need to mention also is that we have an adoption day coming up on April the 30th on the Sunday. It will be at the Meadows. You'll see a lot more about this between now and then, but it's something to keep in mind. If the idea of owning a greyhound appeals to you, and why wouldn't it, that would be a fantastic day that we could see you at the Meadows. If not necessarily to come and take a dog home that day, but come and ask questions and meet the breed. I think it's really important that you meet the dogs and pat them and get to know them. A lot of people have some strange ideas about greyhounds, and meeting them is a really good time to find out exactly what they're like and feel the love. I think all we need to do right now is push on with our presentation from Liam. So I'm now going to try the old share screen thing. Remember, if you have any questions, put them in the chat. We'll be monitoring this through the night, and we'll be back in about an hour after Liam's presentation. Hope you enjoy it. Thank you.
Hi guys, my name's Liam and I'm going to be talking to you today about bringing home your greyhound. So getting your new dog situated in the house, kind of some things to go through to kind of get them comfortable and settled in and things like that. And then we're also going to troubleshoot a couple of common problems that people tend to have with these dogs. Big thanks to GAP for letting me talk about greyhounds today. I'm a pretty big fan of greyhounds, so it's always fun to have a bit of a chat about these guys. Okay, so first things first, introductions. So who am I and why do you care about what I have to say? So my name is Liam Deans-Pope. I'm a dog trainer who's been working in the industry for about 13 years or so now. I've had a variety of different roles, worked as a assessor at a GAP for a couple of years. I'm currently working as a behaviour consultant out at the RSPCA Behaviour Clinic, new service that we've just started up called Good Pet Behaviour, working with a couple of veterinary behaviourists and just kind of working on some more complex cases. Also do some consulting through my own business, Dogs Body Animal Behaviour. One thing probably worth mentioning about what I've done in the past too is while I was out at GAP working out there, I completed a research project looking into greyhounds and kind of how their early life experiences affect their the rate of predation that they show towards other breeds of dogs. So that was fairly interesting to kind of work through that kind of stuff. Got a couple of photos up here. So one is of me and my Labrador Jinx out in the rain having a bit of a hike. And then we also have a couple of photos of some of the GAP foster carer training sessions that I've run. So just kind of teaching some of these foster dogs a couple of new skills and kind of teaching their carers how to kind of work towards giving these guys a good start. All right, so what are we going to cover today? So first of all, we're going to be talking about introducing your new dog to the home. So what we're going to cover in the first week, how we're going to set them settled in, kind of some common mistakes that people make and how we can avoid them. We're also going to have a little bit of a talk about recognizing and responding to fear and stress in these guys. I find it's a fairly important thing to know because obviously if you have a dog who's getting worried and a bit stressed out in the house. That's going to lead to all sorts of different behavior problems, and ideally we want them to feel nice and comfortable and relaxed in the new place they're living. We're also going to have a bit of a talk about separation issues. Separation issues pretty much includes anything, that happens while we're not there. So barking, destructive behavior, getting distressed, all that kind of stuff. Any one of these topics could pretty much be its own presentation. So we're just going to kind of skim over a lot of this kind of stuff and give you a bit of a crash course as to settling these guys into the home. But if there's anything in particular that you're working with these kind of stuff, you're probably going to need a bit more information in the long run. All right, so first topic, getting started, bringing your greyhound into the home and introducing them to the house. All right, so first thing I like to talk about with these guys before we are actually looking at bringing a greyhound home, or pretty much any dog really, I think it's a really good idea to have a bit of a think about what kind of dog is going to suit your household and what your lifestyle is and things like that. And what exactly you're looking for in a dog. For example, if you're looking for a hiking buddy or a dog you can take to, endless amounts of training and all that kind of stuff, you might find that a greyhound, who are often a little bit more on the slow and sleepy side, might not necessarily be the best fit for that kind of environment. Similarly, if you live in a house where you have a couple of rabbits and you've got a cat or something like that, obviously some of these guys can be cat friendly, but you'll find a lot of them, because being sighthounds, they might struggle a little bit more with those pocket pets and those little guys around the place. So worth having a bit of a think about it before you decide, yep, this is definitely the breed I'm after. Obviously greyhounds are absolutely wonderful dogs, and I don't want to talk you out of buying one or anything like that, but they aren't for everyone, so worth thinking about that kind of stuff. Secondly, so I've got a point here saying more than just a coat color. So the reason I've got that in there is because obviously people tend to be attracted to a lot of the pretty coat colors. They want one that's blue or brindle or something like that. But I find the most important thing to look at when we're looking at adopting a dog like this is what kind of personality are they? So are they a fairly confident, calm kind of dog? Are they a little bit more on the shy and timid side? And what kind of personality is going to fit in well with your household? For example, if you have a really busy household and you've got kids coming around every other day and things like that, you might find a shy and timid greyhound isn't going to, adjust too well to that kind of environment very quickly. Whereas if you have a very confident, personable greyhound, then maybe that kind of environment is going to be exactly what they're after. All right, so next I'd like to talk about post decisions. So you decided you want to take that greyhound home, and kind of what's that going to look like going forward. So first of all, like I said, what's that going to look like for your greyhound? So where's he going to sleep? Who's going to walk him? What's he going to eat? What days will be home with him? All that kind of stuff. Worth having a bit of a think about it before you just randomly go out and get a dog, because obviously if we have to kind of figure these things out on the fly, that's when the things start to get a bit more tricky. Whereas if we've planned for it, then often you'll find, these things are pretty easy. Worth having a bit of a chat with the family as to who's going to be responsible for what. If you've got one person in the house who's kind of doing everything for the dog, you might find the dog absolutely adores them, but you'll find that the person might get a little bit sour about the fact that they're the one who's cleaning up and walking the dog and all that kind of stuff. So worth making sure that you're having a chat about divvying up responsibilities and all that kind of stuff, especially if you live in a house with roommates or young children or something like that. Secondly, is there anything we should plan for before we bring that dog home? So, for example, do you need to make sure your yard is nice and secure? It's a whole lot easier to do that kind of stuff before you've got a dog who's potentially testing your fences than it is to just, make sure you've got a nice secure yard before that dog comes home. Or other things to think about, have you got a holiday planned for the next couple of weeks or something like that? Because if so, probably worth waiting and see what dogs are available when you get back and you've got that free time, rather than going down, falling in love with the dog, and then going, all right, well, now I'm going to have to figure out what to do with you while I'm out of town. Last point here, I've got buy the basics first. So once you've decided you're going to adopt your dog and you've picked one out and everything looks like it's going pretty well, worth getting a hold of those basic items that you're going to need for your dog before they actually come home. So, the beds and the dog bowls and grabbing some food and figuring out all that kind of stuff. Obviously, we don't necessarily want to have to stop on the way home and go into pet barn and all that kind of side of things. It can be a little bit stressful picking up a dog and bringing it home and all that kind of stuff. So we want to make sure we're kind of prepared for it before they're in the car with us. All right, so one more thing I want to have a bit of a talk about before we start digging into what we want to do with our dog when they first come home is just to give you a little brief rundown of a greyhound's life before retirement, so when they're still a racing dog and things like that. Obviously, early life experiences can have a really big effect on a dog's behavior moving forward. So a dog who has been around a whole bunch of other breeds of dog and they've been around kids and things like that from quite a young age, you'll probably find that as they grow up, they're really comfortable with those things. Obviously, with greyhounds, they're not necessarily getting exposed to the same kind of stuff that your standard pet dog might do when they're younger. Your standard pet dog is usually picked up, from a breeder at, maybe 10, 14 weeks or something like that. And from there, they kind of start to adjust to that home life quite quickly. With a greyhound, they might be, 2 to 4 years old or something like that before they're actually coming into that same home environment. Race dogs are raised a little bit differently to your pet dogs. Obviously, it does tend to be highly variable, so it's different from breeder to breeder and all that kind of side of things. But you'll find it's not uncommon that these guys are group reared, so they're raised with a whole bunch of other greyhounds around the place. They're often raised in a either kennel or yard environment kind of thing. So not necessarily spending, the same kind of time inside a house that we'd see with, your standard pet dog. And often you'll find they're, paddock raised or something like that. So they're used to kind of being outside and hanging out there for most of the day, rather than our dogs, which often spend a huge amount of time inside the house. They might have, like I said, they might have limited experience inside. So most people who are adopting a pet dog want something which is going to be inside the house with us quite often. You might find that your dog hasn't necessarily spent a huge amount of time inside houses. And so we're going to have to kind of teach them how to adjust to that kind of stuff too. So a couple of more things that you might want to have a bit of a think about that your dog might not have a huge amount of experience with before they come home with you. So one thing I always say to people is be aware that they might not have a huge amount of experience with other breeds of dog. Quite often greyhounds will have a huge amount of experience with other greyhounds, but you put them around a French bulldog and they look at it like it's a very weird looking, deformed greyhound or something like that. So it can blow their mind a little bit. Worth having a think about strange surfaces, so things like, your tiles and floorboards and stuff, which we'll talk a little bit more about later on. Being left alone. So we'll talk more about this one a little bit later on, but often these guys have spent a whole lot of time around other greyhounds and aren't too used to being entirely by themselves. Taking treats from the hand. So seems like a strange one, but this picture I've got up top here of the little brindle girl taking a treat from my hand over there. This used to be one of the things I worked on quite a lot in the kennels, because I'd present the dog with a treat, they'd look at it, they'd be quite interested in taking it, but they wouldn't understand that they're supposed to take it from my hand. So they'd kind of look at me and go, oh yeah, you meant to put it on the ground so I can eat now. So sometimes these guys, we even just need to teach them that, yep, cool, food from hand is a thing that actually happens. Sharing a living space. So often these guys might not have shared a close quarters living space with a human before. So sleeping inside in the lounge room might be a little bit different to being out in the paddock where they've got as much space as they need. And a couple of other things, dealing with traffic and bikes and skateboards and things like that when you've got them out for a walk. And even dealing with things like stairs and elevators. Often, obviously, paddocks don't tend to have a whole lot of stairs going on in them. So sometimes you'll find you've got a dog who doesn't really have much experience with that kind of stuff. All right, so first week, your decision's made, you've decided which dog you're bringing home, and you're ready to do so. So congratulations. What now? So first thing I like to say is take it slow. As tempting as it is to kind of rush through all the things you want to do with your dog, in the first couple of days, taking them for a walk, introducing them to your mates, doing a play date with another dog, all that kind of stuff. You tend to find that even just the process of bringing a dog home and establishing it into your house can be a huge experience for these guys. So sometimes their minds are pretty blown by all the new stuff going on. Think about how if you were to move to a different country where you didn't speak the language, they've got strange cultures and all sorts of stuff, and you have no idea what's going on, and then someone's like, okay, cool, now that you're here, let's go for a run, let's go out there, let's see the sights, let's do all this stuff. You're probably just going to want 24 hours just to decompress and get used to the place and settle in a bit. A little bit similar with these guys. Some of the things that we want to think about with this kind of stuff too, each one of these things we'll go through on its own individual slide, but we'll talk about establishing a safe place for your dog. So giving him somewhere where he can, relax and sit and do his own thing. We're going to talk about limiting the amount of options he's got within the house. So kind of reducing the amount of freedom he's got until he starts to kind of get used to the place and can be trusted to run around by himself. We're going to talk about establishing a routine for your dog. So giving him a place where he can, understand what's going to be happening throughout the day. We're going to be talking a little bit about walks, so how to get your dog used to walks and what the first couple of walks should look like. We're going to talk a little bit about resource control, which is kind of, how we modify and change behavior and how we can kind of access what our dog really wants. And also we're going to have a bit of a talk about toilet training. So it tends to be pretty high up there on the list of things that people want to cover. So we'll talk a bit about that too. Cool. So firstly, let's have a talk about your Greyhound safe place. So safety is a huge requirement for any animal. So if your dog doesn't feel safe, you're going to find that everything else from there is a real hassle. So if you're trying to build a relationship with this dog and he doesn't really feel safe with you and in this home environment and all that kind of sort of things, we're kind of building on a pretty shoddy foundation. So I find the first thing I want to do with any dog that's coming into a new environment is I want to make sure they feel safe and comfortable. Just on that as well, before we start talking about how we establish that safe place, I just want to talk a bit about, a lot of people still feel that they need to kind of correct our dogs and tell off bad behavior and things like that. If you go back to that safety point for a second, if we're talking about how we want to make sure our dog feels safe and comfortable in our home, we need to make sure that they understand that doing something wrong isn't going to result in us, screaming their head off and bopping them across the nose or something like that. So especially in those early days, I want to avoid a lot of the old school methods of telling them off and corrections and all that kind of side of things. I'd rather redirect behavior towards what I'm actually after, and then later on down the track I'll actually train desirable responses. So we'll teach them the things that I want them to do, which will in turn get them things they want. We'll talk a bit more about this later on. Cool, so a safe place. When we're talking about safe places, my main point with this one is I want to give them somewhere which is pretty much their bedroom, their place that they can chill out, that they can, decompress and relax for a bit. I've got a couple of different options up here on the screen. So we've got a picture of a dog hanging out in the backyard. If you've got a dog who has had very little experience inside the house, you might actually find that he's more comfortable in the backyard, just because he's used to kind of having some grass and having some quiet time. So it might be worth seeing if your dog is more comfortable spending some time out there initially and then slowly introducing them to the house. Not the way for all of them, but definitely something for some of them. We've got a baby gate there, so we've got a dog being blocked off from the small child and stuff like that. So basic idea of what I'd be looking at with a safe place for this stuff is I'd be going, cool, so you've got an area of the house which is your area. You can be in the laundry, the bedroom, or something like that. Small space which is nice and secure, and you can get used to that place before you move any further. We've got a couple of other ones here. So we've got a dog bed. So often I'll have a couple of dog beds around the place, giving the dog somewhere where they can go, yep, that's for me. I'm meant to sleep there. I don't have to worry about the rest of the house. And we've also got a crate. So a crate can be a really great way of providing a safe little den that our dog can retreat to. They know no one's going to touch them in there. They know they're fairly safe. So yeah, crate training can be a really useful thing for a new dog as well. Usually with any of our safe places, I try and have a couple of basic rules around what they're going to look like. So first of all, you let your dog choose the safe place a little bit. So set them up somewhere comfortable, but if they constantly are getting up and trying to wander outside, that's kind of when I'm going, okay, well maybe it's outside, leaving them outside for a little while is actually a better fit. Secondly, when they have established that safe place, so for example, their bed or their crate or whatever it might be, that's when I want to also go, okay, well, while you're on your safe place, I'm not going to touch you. As much as, we like to pat our dogs, and a lot of the time our dogs really like to be patted too, often our safe place is a spot where they can get themselves away from all that and just go, cool, nothing's going to happen here that I can't kind of control. So if you desperately want to give your new dog a cuddle, maybe call him up off that safe place, get him to walk towards you. If he looks at you like, oh, I'd really rather not, then just go, cool, no worries, I'll give you a pat when you do get up. Couple of things about where we want to establish that safe place. So usually I'll try and avoid putting them in like a walkway or a busy foot traffic area or something like that, because I don't want them lying somewhere where they're going to have someone walking past their head or stepping over them every 2 seconds. As much as possible, I also try and put them in like maybe a corner or something like that. So they've got 2 walls around them, so they feel nice and secure, and no one's going to sneak up on them while they're resting. We want to make sure it's a comfortable and warm spot. So, somewhere where they've got a nice cushy bed or a blanket or something like that. If they are, trying to hide under the stairs or something like that, often that's when I go, cool, well, maybe you find that area secure, but I'm then going to put a blanket in there so you've got somewhere to sit and feel nice and comfy. We might want to minimize visual stimulation. So if you have a dog who's pretty switched on to everything and they're constantly scanning and watching the movement in the house and all that kind of stuff, we might want to pop them somewhere where they can't see quite so much going on. So an example of that would be if you've got a dog who's sleeping in a crate, maybe we throw a sheet over the top of it so they've only got a little bit of a window that they could look out of rather than kind of scanning around the room constantly. Can be quite a good idea to have a quiet space where they can sit. So quiet space, obviously we're just going to make it somewhere where they're not, in the middle of the house where there's all sorts of raucous going on. And last thing on this, you might want to look at changing whether it's near to people or further away from people, depending on what the dog needs. So if you have a dog who's a little bit more independent, they don't really want to interact with people right now, you might find it's a good idea to pop them in a room somewhere where they're not necessarily having to deal with strange people coming over and introducing themselves every 2 seconds. Alternatively, if you have a dog who seems to get a lot of comfort and a lot of reassurance from the proximity of people, you might find you want to set up that safe place somewhere close to you. So maybe popping it next to the couch where you sit or something like that, so they're nice and close and they can hang out if they need you. All right, so next thing I wanted to have a talk about is establishing a routine and sticking to it. Dogs absolutely love routines. So routines are a really great way to build up confidence, especially in a more nervous dog, because it gives them a great way of expecting what's going to be happening next. So they can't tell the time, and we can't speak to them and give them a rundown of the day. But if we have a vague plan as to what the day looks like each day, then we can then they can get a lot of reassurance that they know what's going to be happening next. When we're looking at establishing a routine, we want to make sure that we're covering all the bases of what our dog's going to need through the day, so we're meeting all their needs. Got a couple of photos around here, so we've got some exercise, so a dog running around having a play. We've got dinner time, so he's got his food there. We've got sleeping and resting time, so dog hanging out in his bed. And the clock's just there just because, to indicate that they can kind of realize what time's going on depending on what's happening. We don't need to be absolutely religious about our routine. It's not like, oh, look, it's 6:05, which means I'm 5 minutes late for dinner, which means this is terrible. We just want to make sure that we've got, an approximate routine in place. So keep that kind of stuff, fairly consistent for the first couple of weeks. And then we can start to kind of slack it off a bit once our dog seems to have established well into the house. So to begin with, make sure that, afternoon walk is always in the afternoon, for example. But then once our dog's feeling pretty good about the world, we can go, all right, cool. Well, a morning or afternoon walk probably shouldn't phase you too much, and we'll see how you handle that kind of stuff. Pretty soon you'll realize when your dog understands the routine, because it'll get to dinner time and they'll start looking at you and going, yep, excuse me, time for you to feed me. So they're not silly. All right, so next thing I want to have a little bit of a talk about is walks. Walks are one of those things where obviously anyone who gets a dog kind of goes, yep, cool, I'm looking forward to walking my dog and taking him out and showing him the world and all that kind of stuff. Big thing with this kind of stuff, and a really common problem I find with greyhounds, is that people kind of start walking them in, especially high activity areas, a little bit too quickly for them, and it kind of blows their mind a bit. It's okay to kind of wait a few days or even longer if your dog seems to be struggling a bit with their environment. The main thing I want to focus on is teaching them, cool, your home is where you're comfortable and where you can relax and where you feel good about the world. So I'm not going to drag you out the door if you're finding that there's just way too much out there for them to take on right now. I've had a few dogs where, especially if they're taking a long time to adjust to the home, we might even wait a few weeks before we really start walking them. In most cases, I'll be finding that giving them at least a few days or until they look fairly relaxed is a good idea. Outside the door, there's a whole lot of things they do need to kind of take into consideration. So there might be other dogs out walking, there's the traffic, there's unfamiliar people, there might be sirens, shop fronts, all that kind of stuff. And all this is happening with a dog who only has just really met you, so they're not really even sure if you got their back just as of yet. What we kind of talk about when we're seeing them having to deal with way too much, way too quickly, is a term we call flooding. So when they're just going, okay, cool, there is just way too much for you to take on right now, and you'll find often it causes quite a bit of stress for these guys. Because greyhounds are quite a, calm and biddable dog in most circumstances, what I find is quite common is that these guys will proceed on the walk because, they're on lead and they're following along with us, and that's what they're supposed to do. But they find the experience quite stressful. And then after a couple of walks, or even after a week of walks or something like that, they start to put on the brakes and go, oh, no, I'd really rather not walk out the door, thanks. I want to see, excitement and enthusiasm when we're actually walking these dogs, rather than the kind of oh, yeah, let's get this over with. So a couple of things to think about when we are doing our first walks. So firstly, like I said, give them a couple of days to settle in before we start taking them out on the street. And secondly, when we do start walking them, we want to probably start them somewhere fairly quiet. If you live in the heart of suburbia or in the city or something like that, you might find walking out the door is a pretty, intense experience for these guys. A little bit easier if you're living in a country area or something like that, obviously. Often I'll spend a bit of time with them on the driveway, so letting them have a wander around the place and a bit of a sniff and get used to the fact that, okay, the house has a front yard or something like that first. And kind of then, when we do start walking, I won't really have an aim as to where we're going. So it's not like I want to go, okay, cool, well, we need to make it around the block and I've got this many steps I need to get in and this is how long the walk's going to take or anything like that. Idea is let them guide you a bit. They can have a wander and have a sniff and things like that. And then after a short while, take them back inside and go, yep, cool, that was a nice fun experience. Like I said, keep it pretty short, so we don't want to make it a huge long walk to begin with. 15 minutes wandering up and down the street and having a sniff at mailboxes is a pretty good start. Once your dog has got into the routine of walking and they seem to be enjoying, getting out and having a wander, follow the same, path or the same route for the first week or so. So give them a chance to get used to the surroundings around them. Get used to the fact that, okay, yeah, there's a dog that lives there and there's a cat that I see over here sometimes and all that kind of stuff. And then once our dog's got into a good routine with our walk, we can start mixing it up and walking them somewhere different. Main thing is we're building up that confidence nice and slow. One last thing with this kind of stuff too is when you do come across really obvious stresses, so for example, that really busy road or that dog that barks and screams and carries on every time you walk past, what might be a really good idea is to avoid those things for the first couple of days. So give them a chance to get used to everything else, and then later on we can go, okay, well, I can teach you how to deal with that stressor once you're not worried about the entire environment. All right, so next thing I wanted to have a bit of a talk about is resource control. So resource control is pretty much, when we're talking about, establishing boundaries for our dogs and things like that, this is kind of what we're talking about. Resources are pretty much anything which our dog has value for within that environment. So it might be access to food, it might be its sleeping space, it might be the water bowl, it might be attention, all that kind of stuff. There are some resources that I tend to make free for the dogs that they've always got access to. So kind of like their safe place or their sleeping place. I've got, usually water and things like that I'll let dogs have free access to. There are other resources that I maintain pretty strict control over, which we can then use to reinforce the behaviors we'd like to see. So for example, food rewards and things like that, they tend to be a pretty common resource that we can use to shape behavior we'd like to see. Some people tend to have a bit of an idea that dogs should do things just because we think they should, whereas dogs are much like anything else. We need to provide some form of payment for the behaviors we'd like to see. If consistently over time we're reinforcing those things we like from our dogs, you'll start to see those become the default behaviors that our dogs will offer, and we don't necessarily need to continue that reinforcement constantly. So to give you a bit of an example of this kind of stuff over here, we've got a couple of photos. We've got a kid who's sharing his dinner with the dog, and so the dog's just helping himself off the plate pretty much over there. And on the second one, we've got a picture of a dog who's sitting on his bed in the corner there and is receiving a food reward. So my example with that one is, if we want our dog to not hassle us while we're sitting at the table and eating our dinner, what might be a good idea is to provide them with something high value that they can do while they're sitting on their own bed over there while we're eating. So don't come and pester me and try and steal my food, because that's not going to get you anything. But if you go over there and sit on your own bed, yeah, great, you might get a food reward out of it. After a couple of times of doing that, you'll find pretty quickly we start preparing our dinner and the dog goes, oh, I'm going to go sit on my bed because that's what happens. And that's what gets me the good stuff. So yeah. Basic tenet of this kind of stuff is desirable resources are the payment that we can use to shape desirable behaviors. If you reward the behaviors you want to see, we can do so with the resources that our dog values. So depending on what our dog's after, we give them access to that if they do the things that we're looking for. One last thing with this kind of stuff too is obviously, we adore our dogs and we want to give them access to all the fun things that they want in the world, but it can be a good idea to avoid giving them, carte blanche to absolutely everything straight away. So we're not going to bring a dog inside the house and go, yep, cool, jump on the bed, jump on my table, grab all my food, do all that kind of stuff. No worries at all, because you'll find that there's no reason for them to learn to become a well-behaved, calm dog inside the house. For example, if we have a dog who is, jumping up on the bed and sharing the bed with us, if you're the kind of person who likes that, that's totally fine. But if we find that we don't necessarily want the dog on the bed, we want to make sure that we can restrict access to that thing fairly well, unless we've got good control over it. So we're not going to let that dog jump on the bed and just sleep there whenever they want. We're going to make sure, okay, well, you only come up if I actually ask you to go up there. And if I'm not going to ask you to go up there, I'm going to block access so you can't jump up there. So I'm going to close the bedroom door or something along those lines. Alrighty, and so last thing on this first week that we want to talk about is toilet training. So like I said, tends to be pretty high up there on the list of priorities that people have, because absolutely no one likes cleaning up a dog mess within the house. If you've got a greyhound that's been fostered already, you might find that they already have learnt some of the basics of this kind of stuff, which can be really useful. But at the same time, I find it's usually safest to assume that a dog hasn't been toilet trained until we've, got evidence to the contrary. For anyone who's had a puppy of another breed or anything like that before, the process is much the same. So it is teaching them, cool, this is the areas where I want you to toilet, so the backyard or your toilet mat or whatever it might be. And these are the areas where I don't want you to toilet, which is inside the house. For a dog, especially if they haven't spent much time inside the house before, it's not necessarily an intuitive, obvious thing for them. Sometimes you'll find they'll just walk away from the living area and they'll go into a spare room and they'll empty out there and they go, yep, cool, well, that's far enough from where I am, so that should be fine. So I find the big thing with this kind of stuff is we want to make sure while we are going through the toilet training process, we want to kind of restrict the amount of freedom they've got around the place unless someone's supervising them. So if our dog gets up from a nap, wanders into a different room, and then disappears from view, probably someone needs to follow it or close the door so they can't leave the room, because it might be that they're wandering off to have a toilet. We need to kind of catch that before it happens. The process of actually teaching a dog to toilet outside is fairly simple. Kind of what we're doing is we're walking them out there on a fairly regular basis. So usually to begin with, I'll be doing a hourly basis, or every time they've woken up from a big sleep or after a big meal or something like that. I'll walk them outside and I'll kind of float around with them. Once they actually do squat or cock their leg and empty out, what I'll do is I'll wait until they're finished, and then as soon as they finish and their leg comes back down, is I'll mark and reward them and give them that treat and tell them how amazing they are. Idea is pretty quickly they start to go, man, mum and dad really like it when I toilet outside. So after a while, once they walk out there, first thing you do is empty, and then they check in with you and go, cool, did you see what I just did there? Means that they're starting to learn consistency, that if they empty out here, good things happen for them. When we do have accidents inside the house, which is, unfortunately always going to happen with a new dog, every so often there's just going to be one that we miss and we'll have to clean up. I find it's a really good idea to clean it up with something like an enzymatic cleaner. So something like a urine off spray or something along those lines. Dogs are obviously a very scent-driven animal, and you'll find that they pick up really strongly from scent cues in the ground when they've actually had a toilet there. So if you have a dog who's toileted on the carpet, they walk past it again, they smell that scent of their urine, even if that's something we've cleaned up and we can barely tell anymore. They'll often have a toilet there and then go, yep, cool, that was the cue that I was meant to empty on this spot. Benefit of this is obviously once we're consistently getting them to toilet outside, those scent cues tell them to toilet out there. But in the early days, if the scent cues are going on the wrong spot, then that can cause us a bit of grief. So yeah, make sure you're cleaning it up completely with something which is actually going to break down the proteins in the urine, just because we don't want our dog picking up on those things. Secondly, so we also wanted to mention avoiding punishing accidents. So if your dog does have an accident inside the house, they cock their leg and they make a big mess on the couch or something like that, we want to make sure that we're not telling them off or kicking up a big stink or anything like that. Most commonly, your dog will actually go, man, you really seem to hate it when I toilet in front of you. So they don't necessarily associate it with the location, but they associate it with the fact that they are doing it while you're there. And so what you start to see is you get a dog who's quite sneaky about it. So then they'll duck into a different room or hide behind the couch or something when they have that wee. So we want to make sure dog doesn't have an issue with emptying in front of us, but they know where we do want them to empty. One last thing on this as well is substrate preference. So most dogs will have some kind of substrate preference of what they prefer to empty onto. I find in most circumstances, greyhounds will find it's grass or something like that, because they're used to, the let-out yards at the tracks and things like that. Some dogs will prefer to empty onto concrete, especially if that's kind of been their pen environment previously. But it does mean that if we have, for example, a courtyard, which is all, gravel or something like that, a dog struggles to toilet out there. So if you're finding that your dog doesn't really enjoy toileting in the environment you provided them with, what can be a good idea is to go get some grass or something like that and actually set them up with a spot which they understand is a toilet. So go get a square of turf or a bit of, astroturf or something like that, pop it down and they can go, oh, yep, cool, that makes sense, I can toilet on this. Later on down the track, we can start to teach them, all right, well, maybe you can also toilet on the gravel. But at least in the short term, I find it's a good idea to have that consistent thing which they're toileting onto. So one more thing I wanted to talk on this before we move on to is just making sure our dog is comfortable in that toileting location as well. Toileting is one of those things where if the dog feels a little bit stressed out or worried about being in that environment, so if, for example, you have a little balcony that you're planning on having the dog toileting on, and the dog gets quite stressed out every time he goes out there because of the noise of the traffic and the neighbors and all that kind of stuff, you're going to find he's not really in a headspace where he wants to really empty out. So worth keeping an eye on them to begin with if you have established that toileting area and he's looking a bit stressed out, because it might be worth doing a bit of confidence building work out there. So spending some time out there where we hang out, make it nice and fun, dog gets some treats, we read a book while they enjoy the sun or something like that, until eventually they go, oh yeah, maybe this place isn't so bad. Similar kind of thing if you've got a suburban backyard, but you know the neighbors are really loud and they're banging on the fence all the time. If he looks worried about going out there, he's probably going to prefer to try and find a sneaky spot inside the house that he can empty. So better off trying to make sure that toileting area is nice and comfortable. All right, so next kind of mini topic that we're going to go through today is identifying a fearful and stressed out dog, and then also how we can kind of respond to it. So here these photos I've got, I was trying to find a couple of photos of stressed out greyhounds, but I couldn't really find anything of a good quality, so I've just kind of got some generic dogs that we found. So first of all, in the top corner up here, we've got, you know, wide eyes, or what we'd call whale eye. So you can see the whites of their eyes, you can see they look a little bit startled kind of thing. Pretty common indication that you've got a dog who's a little bit worried about something. Might be that it's just a startle and they get over it quite quickly, but you'll also see this in dogs who are in an environment which is just a bit stressful for them. We've also got a photo of a dog yawning over here. Yawning is a really common sign that you'll see in stressed out dogs. So they get a bit worried and they're just kind of floating around, and especially if it's that kind of like consistent stress rather than just that one thing which has set them off and then they get over it, where they'll yawn and they'll shake a little bit and things like that. We've got a dog who's showing his teeth over here, so that's more to indicate that aggression is quite often a response to fear or stress or something along those lines. So if, for example, you've got a greyhound who's never come across another dog before, and then a big boisterous kelpie comes running up to him while you're out for a walk, you might find that he might have a snap or a growl or a grizzle or something like that, just because, you know, that guy's really given him a fright and is quite worried about it and is responding in an aggressive way to kind of make that dog leave him alone. And lastly, we've got a photo of a dog who's kind of hiding behind some stuff and kind of got those whale eyes and that lowered body again. So kind of when I was talking about before about establishing a safe place, and if we've got a dog who's consistently hiding behind furniture or taking themselves under the stairs or something like that, often those are indications that your dog is a bit stressed out. There's a whole lot of other indications that we can look at, but this just gives you a little bit of a crash course as to how we can spot a dog and go, yep, cool, I think you're a bit worried, mate. So one thing I did want to talk about with greyhounds too is the concept of stressing up and stressing down. To be a bit more scientific about it, it's kind of talking about the level of arousal that they feel and how worked up they actually get and all that kind of side of things. But stressing up is kind of when we're talking about those dogs who get a bit worried, and you can see they're getting increasingly more active and jittery as they get stressed. So if you think, for anyone who's owned a staffy before, those dogs who get a bit worked up and they start jumping up and they get a bit mouthy and you can see the lines on their face and they're showing you their teeth and they're barking and they're panting and all that kind of stuff, those are kind of the dogs where we go, oh yeah, cool, like you're very clearly stressing up and you're getting more and more worried. The opposite of this is when we're talking about stressing down. So dogs who are still experiencing all that stress, but they're really internalizing it a whole lot more. Got this meme over here, which you've probably all seen before, which is that this is fine dog. This is kind of how I tend to think about these guys, where they're just sitting there and they're quiet and they're not doing anything and they're just staring into the distance. And all these things are happening around them and they're just hoping that if they just sit there quietly, everything will go away. Fairly common behavior that we see in a lot of greyhounds, which is kind of why I wanted to bring it up. Because if you haven't had a huge amount of experience with dogs before, and especially with greyhounds, I have a lot of people who don't even identify that their dog is actually getting a bit stressed. So things to watch for is potentially if they're not really displaying a lot of behavior, so they're just kind of standing there, kind of not doing anything and waiting. If they've got their mouth shut and their ears back and they might have wide eyes or they might be panting or something, but they're not really doing a huge amount of anything, often that's a dog who I'm describing as kind of stressing down. To give you a bit of an example of this one, this is a photo of a dog I found in my camera roll when I was preparing this presentation. This guy was coming in for an assessment process, so he was coming in to be assessed with the little dogs. Obviously there's a whole lot of stuff going on that he doesn't really know what's going on there. He was wearing his muzzle and somehow he shook his head and managed to spin it around, so he's almost wearing it like a hat. When I came over to see this guy, he wasn't trying to take that muzzle off. He wasn't really moving. He was just standing there and just going, "Oh, I'm stuck. I'm just gonna wait and hope it all goes away." So even though he could probably pull this off and shake his head around and get it off himself, he's gone, nah, it's stressful, I'm just going to stand here and wait for it to go away. So this is kind of what I'm talking about when we're discussing stressing down. All right, so responding to stress. So just to give you a couple of examples of things that we want to think about when we are dealing with stresses in dogs. So first one I've got is that walk we were talking about. We've got a dog who's out on the street, he's crossing over the road, strange surfaces, there's cars, there's a person, he's wearing a collar and lead, which you might not be too comfortable with, all that kind of stuff. So there's quite a few, potential stresses in that environment. We have an alarm clock, which is mainly just to signify that strange noises and loud noises can obviously be pretty stressful for a dog. So for example, storms are a really common one. You've got a storm that comes rolling over and the dog gets a bit worried and jittery and things like that. Not uncommon. My Labrador still struggles with that kind of stuff. I've got a picture of a clown down here. Obviously clowns are pretty freaky for a lot of people, but the reason I've got it here is for dogs is because you can see his posture's strange. He's got a big baggy coat, which can often kind of throw off dogs a bit because they're like, oh, your body shape's not what I expect it to be. He's wearing a hat, which obviously changes up that profile of the person and makes them look a little bit more intimidating as well. And he's moving weird, so he's spread apart and he's got his arms in the air and stuff like that. So all that kind of stuff, you might find your dog kind of looks at it and goes, oh my God, what is going on there? So worth thinking about, if your dog comes across someone who's wearing a big hat or something like that. Probably not going to come across a clown, but there's still things about that image that, your dog might, recognize. And lastly, we've got a picture of that slippery timber floor. So you can see it's nice and shiny and looks very pretty, but you're probably going to find it doesn't have a huge amount of grip, and your dog probably hasn't spent a huge amount of time walking on timber floors before. So a dog who's been raised out in a kennel run or in a paddock or something like that, coming inside and dealing with a surface that is so slippery might be a little bit uncommon for them. So we'll talk a bit about how we can get them a bit more comfortable with that kind of stuff. But yeah, worth thinking about. All right, so what do we do if our dog is showing signs of fear or stress, particularly in the context to something we can identify, so something over there which is setting them off. So first thing, we want to avoid that flooding concept we were talking about before. So we don't want to just throw them in the deep end and go, cool, mate, off you go, you suck it up and get used to it. The common example I tend to use with this one when we're talking about establishing to avoiding flooding and building up confidence is I'll talk about a dog who we've just popped into a dog park or something like that when they don't have much experience with dogs. So we get our new dog, we toss him over the fence and go, all right, mate, you go and deal with those 50 new dogs. You're going to find that potentially you've got a dog who can kind of sink or swim and does really well, and he kind of starts to kind of socialize with those dogs and does nicely. Or you might find a dog who just gets a bit freaked out by the whole thing and just goes, oh my God, this was terrifying. And next time you come across that circumstance, you're going to find his stress amps up that much quicker. What I find is actually a really good idea for these guys is we determine what our dog can tolerate relatively comfortably, and then we slowly build up confidence from there. So if we were to use that dog park example again, we'd be talking about, all right, well, I'm not going to throw you in the dog park, but maybe we'll walk past the dog park and you can have a look at what the dogs are doing in there. I'm going to give you a couple of treats and then we're going to continue on our walk. Next day when we come along here, we get a little bit closer, maybe even we say hi to one of the dogs and we have a bit of a sniff, and then we keep moving on again. And you'll find within, a week, a couple of weeks, depending on your dog, they're actually feeling pretty good about that whole process. So things aren't quite so scary anymore. Another example that I wanted to talk about, and what I've kind of got photos of over here, was when we were taking photos of teaching a greyhound how to use stairs. So stairs are one of those things where you've probably seen plenty of dogs who've had a huge amount of experience with them. They're up and down in no time flat and doesn't bother them at all. Like I mentioned before, there's not a lot of stairs floating around in a paddock. So a lot of these guys haven't really come across them before. What we want to do is, we're starting with a really small staircase. So this staircase has got, 4 stairs for them to get up and that's about it. And you can see from that hand that we've got luring the dog up as well. There's also a food reward involved. So we're going, cool, I know this is a bit stressful, but you're going to get paid for this thing. There's something good in response for it. We're not dragging them up the stairs and forcing them to climb the stairs really quickly. We're luring them up and letting them take their own time with it. Often what I'd be doing is I'd maybe toss a couple of treats at the top of the staircase, I pop a couple on the stairs, and I teach them, yeah, cool, take it at your own pace, walk up there, grab the food as you go, and once you get there, you can kind of eat those things and you'll feel nice and good about the world. We can do similar kind of things with, the slippery floors I was talking about before. So used to be a bit of an old school thing where if your dog's worried about slippery floors, you just drag him into the middle and go, yep, cool, well, the only way you're getting off this is by walking, so I guess you better get used to it quick. What I find is a whole lot more successful is if to begin with, if our dog's really, really petrified of those surfaces, we make sure there's a way he can walk around which isn't quite so slippery. So maybe we've got a couple of carpet runners or something like that to begin with. I've had a few people who will even use like some rubber tiles or something like that and set up a couple of spots where our dog can hopscotch around the floor. And then what I'd start doing is I'd go, okay, cool. Well, while we're hanging out in that safe spot, so somewhere where there's a bit of carpet that you don't feel worried about walking, maybe what I'll do is I'll pop a couple of treats on that slippery surface near the edge. You can venture out there, you can eat that treat, you can go back to the area you feel comfortable. Repeat that kind of stuff, sprinkling the treats across the floor until eventually our dog goes, oh, you know what? I don't think I die when I walk on this. I think if I take it slowly, I don't actually even fall over. And you'll find from there quite quickly they start to adjust and go, yeah, cool, I can manage this stuff. This is no big deal. So once again, it's just that process of going, cool, here's where you're comfortable. This is where I want you to be. How do I slowly encourage you and shape you to feel better about that process? All right, so last topic we're going to talk through today tends to be a pretty big one for a lot of people, is separation problems. So by separation problems, I pretty much mean anything that happens when our dog's being left by themselves. So it could be destructive behavior like we've got with this dog over here who's chewed the couch apart, or it might be barking and carrying on. It might be scratching at the door. It might be pacing around the place in the backyard. We'll talk about it a bit later, but you also get some very subtle ones who don't necessarily show a huge amount of outward signs of distress, but they'll, watch the door and whinge or something like that. It's one of those things where with greyhounds we do see a bit of it, but it's not necessarily a breed-specific thing. Obviously, lots of breeds of dogs struggle with separation problems, and especially post-COVID, we had quite a lot of dogs who were used to having a whole lot of company. So it's a problem that I'm still seeing crop up every so often. So, well, more than every so often, really. So first thing is obviously these things do tend to vary a whole lot in intensity. I get some dogs who will absolutely panic when they're left by themselves. I've had some dogs who will literally break through windows and things like that to get to company. I've had other dogs who have a bit of a whinge for a couple of minutes and they go, oh, nah, well, I think we'll probably be okay, and go to sleep and wait for their owner to return. So yeah, worth knowing that it varies a lot from dog to dog. Big thing I tend to find about this one, and it comes back a little bit back to that point I made to begin with about feeling safe in their home environment, is separation problems tend to be largely about feeling safe. So if our dog views us as a source of protection, a source of safety, you're going to find all of a sudden if we're completely separate from that, and so the dog goes out in the backyard and we duck off, you might find a dog goes, oh my gosh, the person who is keeping me safe is gone. So now how am I going to deal with this kind of stuff? If they're not feeling particularly safe in that environment, so if there is an environment where they've got a bit of noise or something like that, or they would prefer to be inside the house or something along those lines, you might find that all that kind of stuff is playing into it as well. And one last thing is on this stuff as well is that obviously dogs are social creatures, so they're used to having some form of company around the place, whether it's in the form of other dogs or people or whatever it might be. While it's reasonable to expect that they can manage some time by themselves, we do need to acknowledge that dogs do need to have a fair bit of access to us too, because dogs just need the company. All right, so one thing on separation related problems too is I find that it's one of those things where there are a lot of different behaviors and a lot of different issues that can present very similarly to your separation related issues. So we want to make sure before we actually start digging into these things that the dog that we're working with is actually having a separation problem and not just something else is going on. So for example, I've got a couple of photos here. We've got a dog who is responding to the fireworks. So there's a bunch of loud noises and potentially he's looking a bit worried and having a bark and whatever it might be. With that kind of stuff, if it's a fear response like that, it's less of a separation problem and more that there's something else in the environment that he's quite worried about. And so then he's barking and carrying on, and to an outside observer or someone who's being told by their neighbors or something like that, they might assume that that's a separation problem. Whereas really it's more of an environmental thing. There's something there which is setting him off. We've got a picture of a dog who has chased a cat up onto a fence. Tends to be a big one I see with a lot of greyhounds actually, because if they've moved to a suburban backyard and there are birds or cats or something like that which are visiting the yard every so often, not uncommon that they'll go running to that fence line and they'll have a good old bark and they'll tell the animal off and they'll respond to it like that. And then the person who is listening from the outside, or they are told by their neighbor again or something like that, might go, okay, cool, well, he's barking while I'm not there, so I think that's a separation problem. Whereas in reality, he's just responding to that, intruder to his environment, so not so much of a separation problem at all. We've also got a dog who's having a good old dig in the backyard there. A lot of people come home to destruction, you know, torn up fencing and dug holes and chewed up couches and things like that. And they go, oh, must be because he's panicked because I wasn't here. Whereas then if we were to get some footage and have a look over it, often you'll find it might just be a bit of a boredom problem. So he's gone, okay, well, I know if my owner's here and he's watching me, he's going to tell me off if I'm having a dig in the backyard. But if he's not here, great, that means I can go have a dig and have a great time out here. So they're opportunistically doing those behaviors because there's no one there to redirect it. And, you know, it's fun, so why wouldn't he? So one thing we can start to do with this kind of stuff too is, first of all, I think the most important step when we're looking at separation problems is to do some detective work to begin with. So have a listen when your dog thinks you've gone. So if you've managed to arrive home and your dog hasn't ID'd you yet or anything like that, maybe creep up and have a look over the fence and see what he's doing. Can you catch him sleeping, or can you catch him having a bit of a rest, or is he wandering around the place? I find if you live in an area where you've got, you know, neighbors quite close, apartments and things like that, worth knocking on your door and just being like, hey, I'm trying to figure out if my dog actually has an issue with me leaving. Would you mind letting me know if he's been barking quite a lot while I'm gone? Because that way it's an extra bit of information we can use. And the big one that I tend to find is really useful these days especially is getting some video recording. So it doesn't have to be anything too flash. It can just be, you know, you've left your phone set up somewhere, or you're doing a Zoom call on your computer and it's angled into the room or something like that. But getting some information as to what our dog's actually doing by recording them and actually watching them can be a huge big help. Yeah, so things like that, I'd be starting there and giving that a crack. One thing you can also have a look into doing is changing up the environment a bit while you're not there. So, okay, cool. Well, if I suspect you're having separation issues in the backyard, what if I was to pop you inside the house? Does the change of environment make any difference there? So, do you feel better now that there's no cats visiting or something like that? Okay, so we've got a couple of videos here that I wanted to show you just as demonstrations. So, got a couple of dogs here. Videos are a couple of years old now. I've got a photo of a greyhound called Lena, who was being left in the backyard and wanted to see what she was getting up to. You can see she's pacing up and down. The front door, the access to the front is around the other side, so she kind of goes around and checks there fairly frequently. The back door was where she was left, and so that's where she's going most commonly to kind of find out where her people have gone. You can see she's having a bit of a bark, she's having a pant. Can't really settle into anything in particular. Moves back around and checks that front entrance again. Has a shake off. All those indications that she's probably not feeling too crash hot about the fact that her people have left her by herself. And then a continuation of that video. You can see she's still coming back, having a sniff at that door. She's actually decided, hang on, what if I can actually try and get in here? So I'm going to have a scratch at the door. She actually managed to get the door handle open and she goes inside. So quite common with this kind of stuff, you'll find these dogs who might get worried, and then often they will focus on areas where they were left, so the door and things like that. All right, so next one I've got is a dog I worked with a few years ago called Elvis. Elvis was originally an only dog, and then then the owners got another greyhound to try and give her a bit of company, and see if that would make him feel a bit better about being left by himself. Made a big difference, but at the same time he was still showing some signs of stress. So, bit of a sudden bark there, but you can see he's having a good old watch at the door. He's frozen, he's barely moving. A little bit more of a subtle sign of stress than that dog who was pacing and scratching at the door and all that kind of stuff, right? But still definitely stressed. Another video down here, a little bit of a longer one, and you can see that dog is just staying there, little sphinx position, just watching that door, waiting for his owner to come back home. So you can see with these guys, you know, it can be important to record our dogs even if we don't necessarily suspect a separation problem, because if we're seeing really subtle signs like this, we might not even know about it until it's been going on for weeks. So, and you'd think that video is actually paused over there, but it's just that he's just lying there so stock still watching that door. has a bit of a wander around. All right, so on the whole topic of separation problems as well, I find it's an important distinction to make to be able to identify the difference between separation-related distress and isolation distress. So separation-related distress is kind of what we're talking about when we talk about, your typical separation anxiety. So a dog who is separated from their owners and then they get really worked up and stressed out regardless of what else is going on. A dog in that kind of environment, you might find that even if they have other forms of company, so they've got other people around the place, a babysitter, another dog or something like that, they don't care, there's safe persons left to them and they're getting distressed about it. The other category, which we tend to see a whole lot more commonly in greyhounds, is isolation distress. So isolation distress is a dog who's just getting worried because he's been left by himself. So he doesn't necessarily need his human company, he just needs some form of company. What I suspect happens with greyhounds is because they're group raised and they've got a lot of other dogs around the place, they're used to having access to other dogs and things like that. And so when we rehome them as an individual dog, then their owner ducks off to work or something like that, you might find that's one of the first times they've actually really been entirely by themselves ever. So it can be a little bit confronting for some of these guys. Quite often with dogs who have isolation issues, I'll find that even if they have another dog around the place who doesn't really interact with them too much, just the fact they've got some kind of company can make a big difference. It's one of those things where when we're dealing with greyhounds, I often say to people, they're a dog who does tend to do better if you have a pair of them. So if you have two greyhounds, they're often easier to manage than if you have a single one. But obviously, if you're living in an environment with a dog who might have some separation issues, we don't just want to throw another dog in there and see what happens. But worth considering if we do suspect it's an isolation problem. These kind of problems do present very similarly, so you might find that your dog's showing some signs of stress, but our management strategies change up a bit. So obviously management's a whole lot easier for a dog who's displaying isolation distress because we can often provide them with a babysitter or something like that. Whereas if our dog just needs our company, then that's going to be difficult when we need to go to work or something like that. All right, so preventative approach to separation issues for greyhounds. Idea with this one is if we're looking at bringing home a greyhound as our dog and we haven't really had, it hasn't really lived inside that house before, what we're going to do is talk about how we can settle that dog in to help prevent these issues developing. So rather than going, okay, cool, we're just going to bring you in and we'll see what kind of separation problems rock up, we'll talk about how we can actually settle that dog in to potentially prevent those separation problems from becoming a thing. First thing I want to look at is giving them time to settle in. So we want to make sure that we're spending a decent amount of time with our dog before we're really making them be by themselves. For example, if you normally work Monday to Friday, I'd probably be at least trying to bring the dog home on a Friday so we can give them the weekend hanging out with us and getting used to the place. So making sure they've got our company while they're getting used to the environment and getting nice and comfortable. And then, once they're feeling pretty relaxed about it, we can kind of see how they do with a bit of separation. I want to make sure that the environment in which I'm leaving the dog, when we do start actually leaving them, is safe and fun. So, it's nice and secure. The dog can't jump over the fence. There's nothing, no huge risk there. And also, he's not going to, have nothing to do while you're gone as well. So I'd probably be leaving him with a couple of toys, maybe a food enrichment thing, stuff a Kong, give him a chewy, all those bits and pieces. Idea is we're giving him stuff that is pretty entertaining to do while we're not there. This kind of stuff can actually be quite useful in the long run because you start to get dogs who go, yeah, cool, bugger off, because when you leave, I get access to a Kong toy and I fucking love those things. Next thing I wanted to mention is make sure they're ready to rest as well. So if you are planning on leaving them alone for the workday and you've got a fairly active dog who likes to do a fair bit of stuff, probably a good idea to take him for a bit of a walk beforehand and burn off a bit of that energy. Because ideally what we want to start to see is our dog rests for most of the time when we're gone. Dogs typically rest, quite a lot. You get some dogs who are quite comfortable resting for 18 hours a day, without a huge amount of activity. And so ideally we want to set them up to be ready to rest while we are gone. So if they're nice and tired, they're even more likely to relax and have a sleep. I find it can be a really good idea to start with small absences. So we want to start with, 15 minutes, half an hour, while we set up a recording, and we can kind of see what they get up to as well. So we're going to make sure that there's not a huge amount of time they're being left alone to begin with, because if they are showing some signs of stress, it's probably going to escalate the longer we leave them. So if we can keep it nice and short, and then we come home and everything's pretty great, then you're probably going to find your dog will get more comfortable more quickly. Low-key departures and arrivals. So when we're talking about this kind of stuff, we want to keep it pretty chill when we do rock up at home and when we're leaving our dog. So even though we're going to miss them and that we'd prefer they were with us and all that kind of stuff, we don't want to make a huge big deal of it when we do walk out the door. So no huge tearful goodbyes, hugging around their neck, weeping into their neck or anything along those lines. Keep it nice and chill, give them a treat, give them a pat on the head and say, all right, mate, be back in a bit, and then off you go. Same kind of thing when you rock up home. We don't want to be jumping on top of them and going, oh my God, I've missed you, because then we're just kind of feeding into that level of stress. What I usually do want to do is I don't want to completely ignore them, because then you get a dog who's like, hang on, am I invisible? What's going on here? What I'd really prefer is we treat it a little bit kind of like you've just walked in and you've seen your partner sitting on the couch. So, oh, hey, how's your day? What's going on? But don't make it a huge, big event. You're not going to run over there and jump on top of them or anything like that. One thing that can be quite important with this kind of stuff too is, especially if your dog is showing signs of stress in like the outdoor environment or anything like that, so you go outside and they kind of are a bit more attentive to you and a little bit more worried and things like that, is change up where you're leaving them. So you might find if they are really comfortable inside the house and their toilet training seems to be going quite well, you can actually leave them inside for half an hour and see what they do. I get a lot of owners who are quite worried about this. They're worried that they're going to come home to a destroyed house. If you think that's what's going to happen, then set up a recording beforehand so you can see what they do over a short absence. So I leave you alone for 15 minutes in the lounge room. I've set up a camera so I can see what you get up to. Oh, yep, cool. You just went and lay on your bed and had a bit of a sleep. In that case, maybe I'll bump it up to an hour next time and see how you travel. Idea is we're going, okay, well, I'm going to make sure you're staying in the most comfortable spot where you are, so that we're not going to get too distressed and we're not going to get these dogs who are scratching down the door trying to get back inside to their safe place. And last thing on this as well is get help. So if you're finding that your dog is showing some really serious signs of separation problems, they're getting really worried, it's making your life difficult, you've always got to have someone home to keep an eye on the dog, get in contact with a trainer or a behaviourist like myself, give GAP a call and have a chat to them, see what they can recommend. There's plenty of different things that we can do, and typically you'll find separation problems are really responsive to behaviour modification. So might take a little bit to actually get there, but it's definitely worth doing the work rather than just living with it and letting your dog practice these stressy behaviours. All right, so in conclusion, kind of key points I wanted to give you guys about this presentation we've gone through today is, first of all, take it slow. So there's no big rush with any of this kind of stuff. When you first bring home a dog, take the time to let them settle into the environment, take the time to let them feel ready to go for a walk, all that kind of stuff. Because you'll find that if we take it nice and slow, they'll actually be ready to do all the fun stuff quicker than if we kind of rush them in and hurry them along a little bit. Next thing I wanted to say, listen to what your dog needs. So a lot of these things I've kind of walked through, I'm kind of tailoring it towards a slightly more nervous dog. But at the same time, like I said, each dog's an individual. You might have one who's really confident and he's feeling pretty good, in which case waiting a week before you take him out for a walk isn't really necessary. So if you have a dog who looks pretty relaxed and is pretty comfortable, keep pushing ahead. If you've got a dog who is looking a little bit more on the worried side and they're looking a little bit like they just aren't really ready to be out on the street as of yet, then that's when we're kind of going to go, okay, well, I'll dial it back a bit and make sure you feel nice and safe before we push that ahead. And yeah, slowly broaden what your dog is comfortable with. So once we've got a little core bubble of what your dog is comfortable with from day to day, that's when we can start to kind of, push the boundaries and make it a little bit more exciting. All right, so that's the end of that. So in terms of contact details, like I said, my name's Liam Deans-Pope. If you wanted to reach out to me, probably best way to do it is to contact me via my email address, dogsbodyanimalbehaviour@gmail.com. If you're looking to book in a consult or anything like that, I still do quite a lot of greyhound work, so I'm happy to help out with that kind of stuff. If you're outside of my usual service area, I can usually refer you through to someone else who can probably help you out too. So yeah. All right, and
Absolutely, Liam, and thank you very much for that incredibly thorough explanation
No worries. Turn on the lights. I'm not sitting in the shadow.
I can barely see you. There's a power
There we are.
supply outage in your area. Does anybody here with us have any questions for Liam after that presentation? You can come off mute and actually ask directly to Liam if you like.
We do have 3 in the chat, Phil, as well.
Could I just ask a question? Pam's my name. Because I've had my greyhound for since June last year, and I've got 2 things that sometimes she doesn't want to go for a walk. So it's hard for me to get her up out of her bed. She's happy to go for a walk in the morning. She'll generally go in the afternoon. But if I want to just take her out or do something, she doesn't want to get out of bed. And I also had an instance for a while, but I think I've overcome that, is that she was right. I would put her in the car. We'd go somewhere. When I got home, she wouldn't get out of the car, to the point that she spent one night in the car. And if I tried to get her out, she would growl at me and whatever. So is that stress behavior? Is that?
Yeah, and I think it can be a bit tricky because it depends a little bit on what else we're seeing, kind of thing. So in terms of that walking kind of behavior, if you have a dog who is lying on their bed and they look really comfortable, and then we're trying to go, all right, come on, off we go, we're going off for a walk, and she just kind of looks at you like, nah, I'm really relaxed here, I don't really want to move. That could just be because she's really comfortable and relaxed where she is. If it's more that there's something about that nighttime walk that's a little bit on the scary side, so potentially there's she doesn't like the dark, or the noises in the shadows, or cars going past, or something like that, then it might be something along those lines that she's gone, no, walks at night time are a bit scary.
I think there's a dog up the road who she used to sniff under the gate, used to be fine, and then for some reason now the dog's become quite aggressive, and it barks and it jumps at the fence, and it did give her a fright one day. So I'm thinking that when I sort of go in the middle, like if I was to go and get a coffee, she associates, that's what I'm thinking might be the issue there.
Yeah, potentially. And sometimes you will find what we call like a single instance learning, where there's just been one particularly scary thing and they've gone, yep, cool, so I got to avoid that at all costs. And sometimes it can be that, maybe another dog gave them a scare or something like that, and they've just gone, cool, well, the best thing I can do is avoid that. So if that's the case, usually what I'd be doing is going, all right, cool, well, we might start by walking you somewhere a bit different, just so we can kind of get back into the routine of it a bit. And then potentially I'd start going, okay, cool, what if we start, incorporating that direction where we saw that dog previously into our walks a little bit too? So what if we cross the road, have a bit of a walk over there, nothing terrible happened, you got some treats, and then we keep walking. And then over time, you should start to see that she goes, oh, well, maybe it wasn't so scary after all. I think I'm probably okay here. So. Yeah.
Oh, good. That's how I've been approaching it. So hopefully she'll be.
Yeah. And in relation to the car stuff kind of thing, often what I'll do with that kind of stuff, if you've got a dog who just for whatever reason is just like, no, I'm not getting out, I'm completely stuck here, is often I'll kind of just leave a lead trailing or something like that. So I've got a point that we can get a hold of them without actually having to reach in and grab them or anything like that. Often I'll try and lure them out with a bit of food or something. So I go, all right, cool. If you get out of the car, you'll get a treat or something tasty. And if she absolutely puts on the brakes and goes, nope, I cannot do it, I'll often just go, okay, well, I'm going to give you a little bit of pressure in the lead just to get you moving. And then kind of bring you out and we'll walk inside. So,
yeah, I suppose I worry about the pressure on with pulling on her neck and things like that. That's
the thing. We don't want to drag them out or anything like that, but sometimes I find it can be a useful cue to go, come on, no, we're heading this direction. I need you to come with me, kind of thing. So we're not jerking on it or anything like that. Just that pressure that goes, okay, well, as soon as you walk towards me, that pressure goes away and we get to go inside. So cool.
Thanks very much, Pamela. Thanks, Liam. We've got one from Samantha also on the chat. Tips or things to watch out for when greyhounds have been in a foster environment for 2 months and they've gotten used to that house, and now they're being adopted into a new house.
Cool. Yes, I think it's always really useful with that kind of stuff, because you can go, okay, cool, you've been living in my house for 2 months, so in theory you know this dog really well, which is always really nice. what I find can be really useful with that is any of those perks and quirks that you have come across living with that dog. So, you know, oh, she really hates slippery floors. She won't go upstairs if she can see the hole in them or something like that. We can flag those as potential problems for the new adopter and then go, cool, these are the things I'd probably suggest that you have a look for when we're bringing you in, kind of thing. So rather than them kind of having to find these things out themselves, you can kind of give them a bit of a guide to these dogs, which can be really useful. Other than that, probably nothing in specific. I think a lot of it's just going to be that whole, okay, now that you're settled in and you're comfortable, you know, what kind of dog are you? What do we know about you? So.
Okay, another one from Andrea that I've got personal experience with this one, loud noises, fireworks on New Year's Eve. I know I've had many dogs that have been extremely traumatized and in fact done damage with loud noises. Are there any tips and tricks to cope with that?
And it's a really common problem. My Labrador at home, you know, when storms roll in, she still gets quite anxious about it. So it can be a pretty common problem, unfortunately. Usually with things like that, I'll usually start by going, okay, cool. Well, how worried are you? Are you just a little bit stressed? In which case I can probably go, all right, well, I'm going to give you something else to focus on instead. So maybe when there's, you know, fireworks start up or something like that, can I give you a bone or a Kong toy or something to chew on, which you can focus your attention onto instead? If they're so worked up to a point where they're just like, nah, I can't look at that. I'm too worried right now. Usually that's when I go, okay, cool. What else can I do to make things a bit less scary? So can I have a bit of background noise? In more severe cases, it can be really useful to have some kind of short-acting medication for those events too. You know, if you know there's going to be fireworks or something next door, it can be worth having a chat with your vet and going, cool, I'm not trying to sedate my dog, but are there medications you can use to reduce the anxiety that they're going to be feeling during those times? So, and yeah, setting them up somewhere where they feel a little bit safe as well. So if, for example, you've got a dog who, when the storm or the fireworks start up, they try and hide under your desk or something, setting them up a little den somewhere can be really useful. So you go, cool, if you're feeling freaked out, come back to your safe place, come hide under here for a bit, and we can kind of slowly teach them that the storm's not going to hurt them or something.
Yeah, there's specifically fireworks. Thank you.
Yeah, cool.
Like that's what I couldn't understand, because thunder and lightning, not a problem. The lawnmower, he thinks that's a game. Vacuum, not a problem. But fireworks, he was trembling so violently, and I just could not settle him.
And sometimes you'll find it's just because they had that one or two really big scares to begin with kind of thing. So they were chilling out, relaxed on the floor, and all of a sudden they heard that ping and that bang, and they've gone, holy crap, that was terrifying. Next time it rolls around, they're a little bit more worried until eventually they get really, really switched on to these things. One other thing that can be quite useful too is we can also do some desensitization work as well, where you go, all right, what if I jump on YouTube and I play the noises really quietly, and then I pair that up with a bit of food or something. So noise goes off, you get a treat, noise goes off, you get a treat, until eventually it's like, oh, yeah, that doesn't matter at all.
Oh, great idea. Thank you, Liam.
Liam, do you put any credit into the coats, the
thunder jackets?
Thunder jackets.
I haven't seen many dogs which it's particularly helpful for. I think every so often you'll get a dog who seems to enjoy the pressure, or I think it's, you know, that kind of distracting stimulus as well. So they're hanging out, they've got something else touching them, so they're thinking more about that. But I find most of the time those jackets aren't hugely helpful.
Yeah, and I think for me it wouldn't have been, because I try to be a human thunder jacket.
Yeah.
We're wrapping myself, literally, I wrapped myself around him to try and protect him. And it made no difference. He just could not stop.
Yeah. I think, you know, different dogs have got different coping strategies. Some dogs just run around and move the whole time. Other dogs go, right, I'm worried, I need to be on top of you. So kind of leaning into what's going to work for them can be really useful too. So I'm not going to go, all right, well, you're trying to sprint around the place, I'm going to pin you to the ground or anything, because that's just going to make you more stressed. Whereas if you're coming over and trying to have a cuddle, yeah, cool, mate, you can lean against my leg, it's fine. So
thank you.
No worries.
Liam, we've got a message here also from Leslie to everyone. We've had our Grey for 2.5 months, and he started nipping us. Any tips on how to stop? We don't think it's aggressive, but not sure. Currently, we use our no sound and walk away.
Yeah, so I'm just thinking, so in terms of mouthiness and things like that, it can be tricky because there's a whole lot of different reasons why dogs will do it. So is Leslie still here? Can I ask a couple of questions? Or
yes, I'm here.
Wonderful. Is it when she's when she's playing or when she's resting, or any particular context?
No,
where you see
it's
or?
normally, it's only me. He doesn't do it to my husband. And it's when I get up in the morning, I sit on the side of the bed and he'll start mouthing at my leg and nipping at my hands.
Oh, is he trying to get you out of bed, or?
Well, that's what I thought. That's why I don't think it's aggressive. I think it's because I've sort of done it when I get up, within 5 or 10 minutes, he gets fed. I think maybe he's trying to hurry me up, but I can't. I have a couple of back issues and I can't jump out of bed. So I don't know if that's it, or if it is he doesn't bite, but he nips, and it does hurt. And our grandson comes here regularly, and I just don't want it to become a problem.
Yeah, and of course. And I think with that kind of stuff as well, often you find mouthiness can be, if, for example, you've got a dog who's lying around the place and someone goes to, pick them up and touch them or something like that, and that's when they get mouthy. That tends to be when we're seeing more of that, can you go away from me behavior, when they're just trying to show us.
Okay.
If it's more of a, they're coming over towards you and mouthing at you, often they're either trying to do some kind of attention-seeking thing, where they're just like, hey, I want this and I'm trying to get a rise out of you. Or it can also be a bit of a play behavior. So they're just like, hey, come over here and have a wrestle with me or something like that. So, lots of different contexts in which you see it. But if it's usually that morning bedtime thing and the dog's kind of going, okay, cool, I'm waiting for you to get up, I'd be thinking potentially he's just trying to hurry you along out of bed.
To hurry me up. Okay. So what's the best way to stop it then? Yeah.
So I think that if it's something where you can prevent it by like going, okay, well, if I'm sitting on the bed, can I tuck my foot under the blanket so you can't physically reach me? And often what I'll start to do is, once we can actually prevent it in some way with some form of management, so is there some way I can stop you from doing it? Often what I start doing then is I go, cool, I'm just going to wait until we start to see a little bit of calm behavior. So dog lies down or walks away or something like that. And that's the bit when I go, oh, great job. Yep, I'm going to feed you. So the idea is they start to learn, oh, there's a different thing that actually causes you to get out of bed. So nipping doesn't work at all. But if you sit calmly on your bed, I'll probably get up and feed you. So.
Okay, so one of the problems may have been that what I did then was got up and fed him quicker to get him to stop. So he saw that as, well, if I do this, I then get my food quicker. Would that be right?
These things happen all the time, where we accidentally reinforce different behaviors, and then the dog goes, oh, cool, that works really well. And then they kind of do it again next time. So they're very good at training us just as much as we are them sometimes. So.
Okay, no worries. Thank you very much.
No worries.
Sorry, can I also ask, Liam, what area do you work in?
So I'm a little bit all over the place, but I live out in Emerald. So I'm kind of out in the northeastern suburbs kind of thing, or southeastern.
Of Victoria?
Suburbs. Yeah, that's right.
Or Emerald, Queensland?
Oh, Victoria.
Yeah. Okay, great.
But I travel all over the shop. So.
Okay.
And I'm also working at it in Burwood as well. So at the RSPCA there too. So.
Okay.
No worries.
Philip, you're on mute.
Hello?
Phil's on mute. I'm not sure. Realised? There we go.
It's been 3 years now that we've been getting used to Zoom meetings. We still have to tell people, you're on mute. Message from Hayley, Liam, who you met when you helped with their first greyhound called Atticus with anxiety. They've now adopted the second greyhound and moved to a quieter area, who Percy adapted exceptionally well, but is now showing destructive behaviours. Is Hayley still on board, that perhaps could explain a little bit more?
Yeah, sure am. Thanks, Liam, for such a great presentation. It was really great to get a lot of information there. So as I briefly mentioned, you met the lovely Atticus, who's actually sitting next to me at the moment. He was our first greyhound, a lot of learning curves with him. We've since got Percy. She was great to start off with, a lot of destructive behaviours as she adapted to the new environment. Quieted down a little bit, but it has since kind of come back. My partner works from home, so spends a lot of time with her, or there's always usually someone in the house. We've tried to kind of spend a bit of time away from the house and kind of build that time away. So just pop into a local cafe for lunch or things like that. But quite often we'll come home to, you know, she's gotten into the bins or something like that. So I guess just if you have any advice for a greyhound who's kind of already settled into the environment and is showing these signs as well.
Yeah, no, fair enough. And I think with this kind of stuff as well, it can be tricky because sometimes you'll find that destructive behavior is because, you know, because you've ducked out and they're going, oh my gosh, I'm pretty worried, so I'm going to, you know, destroy things and things like that. Other times it can just be because they go, oh, beauty, mum's out. In that case, I'm going to get into the bin because I've been eyeing that off for the past day or something. So, so usually what I'll start by doing in that kind of circumstance is kind of like what we were talking about before, setting up a camera or something so you can get a bit of a look as to what they get up to. Because if she spends the first, you know, 20 minutes napping on the bed, then kind of gets up and wanders over and has a sniff of that bin or something, then we can go, all right, I think this is more of just an opportunistic thing. If it's more that, you know, we're seeing some of those indications of stress and then, hey, dude, and then that's when we start, Atticus, look at you, dude. And that's when we're starting to see, you know, the destructive behavior and things like that. Often that's when I start to go, cool, well, in that case, I probably need to find things that you're allowed to destroy. So maybe I can find you a couple of enrichment toys or something that I can do to keep you busy or whatever it might be. So, yeah, so trying to figure out what the cause of that destruction is and then going, cool, well, how can I meet this kind of thing? If it's a set thing, then, you know, figuring out what we can do about that. If it's more of just a destruction for the fun of it thing, going, cool, well, in that case, I'm going to give you things that aren't the bin to get into. So
amazing. Thanks, Liam.
No worries.
Thanks, Harley. And one more before we move on to any questions for Megan. Megan Thomas, who is the acting adoption manager at GAP at the moment. The most rewarding enrichment activities, this is coming from Julie Canty, for new owners to introduce greys when they first come into a new home.
Yeah, cool. So I think it varies a bit from dog to dog because obviously different dogs have got different things that they prefer compared to, you know, other dogs kind of thing. My go-to in terms of food enrichment tends to be things like your Kong toys and stuff like that, just because, you know, they're quick and easy and they last a long time. I think the big thing with pretty much any enrichment activity to begin with is going to be starting out really easy though, because especially if you look into a greyhound who's never really used a Kong toy or something like that, and we go, great, I'm going to jam a whole bunch of food inside it and then give it to you. You might find the dog goes, nah, that's way too hard, I give up. Whereas if we go, okay, what if I smear some cat food or meat paste or something like that in there and then get that to you, you get to lick it, you get food out of it, it's really easy. Pretty quickly, we can kind of build up their skills to actually figure out how these things work. And then from there, we can make it more and more difficult. If you've got a bit of grass, sometimes I'll kind of give them their kibble in the morning with a bit of a treat scatter. So you can just toss it into the grass and go, cool, you go find it rather than eating it out of a bowl. Different smells and things like that can be good. Walking in different areas. Yeah, pretty much anything new and interesting. So.
Okay, thank you, Liam.
Cool. No worries.
Megan Thomas, I introduced Megan at the start of the broadcast this evening. Megan's the acting adoption manager at the Greyhound Adoption Program. I wonder if anybody has any questions for Megan as to the practicalities, perhaps, of adopting a greyhound through GAP at this point. Please come off mute and forward any questions if you have any. It seems everything's been explained, Megan. Do you have anything to add? Do you have anything to add, Megan, to the information that we've seen tonight?
I think I must say thank you, Liam. I think that's been incredibly informative for a lot of people who potentially have had greyhounds for a while. I think you can always learn something new from every presentation people attend. I think the really big thing for us is if you are looking for a greyhound, just feel free to give us a call or drop us a line via email to GAP and let us know what it is that you're looking for. And we will work with you to find the greyhound that best suits your needs. And I think that's the biggest piece of advice that I can give to people. We will always work with your situation, your circumstances, and find that dog that fits you as perfectly as possible as well.
And I believe there are some opportunities for fostering, Megan, as well.
Yeah, I mean, you can always become a foster carer with GAP. We do foster care for 3 to 4 weeks at a time, and you can contact us if you're interested in something like that. It's an easy way to, I guess, kind of be not non-committal, but just kind of try out a greyhound for a while, see if you like the breed, see if they fit with you and your lifestyle. And you might actually fall in love with the greyhound that you foster, and it becomes what we call a foster fail, and you might adopt it as well. So, but always just reach out to us and we can point you in the direction of our foster care coordinator, who would love to have anyone come on board who would like to foster our greyhounds.
There's no shame in being a foster fail. I have been a foster fail myself. After 7 fosters, I finally found one that I couldn't say goodbye to. I'm so glad I did. Now, 2 other things before I let you all go, because we've gone a little bit over our deadline. A couple of things I need to let you know about. Next Wednesday night, we'll be doing this again, and we'll be doing it with Dr. Beck, who is one of our veterinary surgeons and has been a long-serving vet at GAP. And she'll be here talking about some of the medical situations that you might find yourself with greyhounds and what to expect. Always fantastic. And every time we've done this, we've had an enormous roll-up for people who really want to find out from Dr. Beck things about teeth and nails and all those sorts of medical things that may or may happen with greyhounds. That's next Wednesday night. Have a look at the website gap.grv.org.au, and you can reserve a place next Wednesday night. And also a reminder of the next adoption day, April 30th at the Meadows. It's a Sunday afternoon. There's more information about that also on the website at gap.grv. It's late. grv.org.au. I feel like I've been talking all day. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. It's been an absolute pleasure having you here. Are there any final questions before we let you go to bed? No, we're all good. Thank you, one and all. We hope to see you very, very soon, perhaps at an adoption day or a walk-in group. Have a wonderful, wonderful evening. See you again soon. Thanks for joining us. Good night.